Listen to Lynn Lozier and Lauren Holohan describe North Carolina's beginnings with NCII.
If we take a step back from when we first applied for this work and became aware of the opportunity to engage in the work with NCII, we were in the midst of implementation of a multi-tiered system of support. Really very directly and intentionally implementing that across our state, across all regions in the state. We also, coinciding with that, we're moving away from a cognitive discrepancy model of identifying students with specific learning disabilities, moving to an instructional model of evaluation and eligibility determination. So we believed strongly that we realized that evaluation identification system had to be integrated within this multi-tiered system of support that supported all students and that special education lived within that system.
I think the really compelling why for us in doing this work is ensuring that students with disabilities have access to the general education curriculum, environment, and instruction as often as possible. And yeah, I think that's been the biggest driver. Yeah, so Lynn was clearly the mover and shaker behind being in touch with NCII, like receiving the invitation. But I think our interest in sort of our readiness to engage the work came out of the evolving specially designed instruction within an MTSS work we were doing, and really trying to situate how we were thinking about educating students with disabilities within our multi-tiered system of support to ensure those were integrated like projects, right? And I think that work just put us in a position to like really think about what are the practices that both general and special education teachers are going to need in order to actually make this an integrated education for students with disabilities. And of course that led us to database individualization as a like, oh, this is how you do it. If we don't get this, then we're not going to be able to pull off our hopes for ensuring that we have an integrated rather than parallel instructional like approach for students with disabilities.
Right. So one of the messages that Lauren and I really tried to communicate early on was that just growth that keeps a parallel trajectory isn't acceptable. That teachers were celebrating growth, which is well and good, but if we're not closing that gap and bringing students closer and closer to grade level standards, then just growth alone isn't good enough. So we were there was a big concern for us and a big driver and a message early on as we were just trying to build awareness of specially designed instruction centered on is that we have to close that gap. But then I also felt that once teachers understood that, they didn't really know how to go beyond the tools that they already had. So they might have an evidence-based program that they were using, but if students weren't responding, then what do I do? So DBI gives them such a beautiful structure that takes these kind of more abstract concepts of intensifying intervention and puts them in a very doable format. And when we look at the taxonomy of intervention intensity and look across those dimensions, I think it's something that teachers can really grab onto, and problem-solving teams, IEP teams, can really grab onto those and systematically think about each of those dimensions to intensify intervention. So it just seems such a beautiful tool that made these kind of abstract concepts, like teachers know that they might need to intensify, but how?
One of the things that we name in our theory of action for our state systemic improvement plan, the data-based individualization is one of our coherent improvement strategies across content areas, right, across grade levels, across all of our school types. Like this is something that we've got to get better at over time if we want to change outcomes for students with disabilities.
Our partnership with the National Center for Intensive Intervention has been incredibly valuable as we have conceptualized and implemented the work of multi-tiered system of support. And in addition to that, how is specially designed instruction situated within that system? And what are the evidence-based practices that we can use when we have students who are non-responsive to evidence-based programs and practices? We've really been able to conceptualize DBI as our intensive level of problem solving. And the resources that are available from the website have been a tremendous value add for us, as well as our local education agencies across the state. So it's at least weekly that I point somebody to the NCII website, either to take a look at the tools chart because they're considering a screening or progress monitoring tool, or that they are considering some type of intervention program and asking questions about, does it meet their local needs and does it have evidence behind it? And it's extremely valuable, particularly at a state agency, to be able to point somebody to a completely unbiased review of those tools, the interventions, and the assessments as well. But then also, I think the way that the resources on the website really bring database individualization to life with the examples that they share and the types of supports and templates and documents that help facilitate and guide the process of that has also been a huge value add. And in addition to that, the intervention lessons that they have and the videos, particularly in the area of mathematics that have been done by Dr. Sarah Powell, have just been extremely well received across the state. And it takes something that seems like it is extremely complex, but it makes it manageable and doable within the context of schools. And so I think that's where we really appreciate all of the resources that are available there, is that it takes the science and it translates it into a way that it can be implemented with a high degree of fidelity within the schools. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the website. I know there's a lot of work behind the scenes that goes into that, and just thank you for that work, because it is a true value to the field, and I can definitely attest to that in North Carolina.
Marty Erskine from the Program Improvement and Professional Development section of the Exceptional Children Division of the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction describes the integration of the work with NCII.
I was very fortunate to be part of the community of practice through a grant with NCII in the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. So it has been a learning experience to be part of that. I think the value is, first of all, we were trained. We were given bite-sized chunks. I think the NCII really modeled those best practices with a leadership team at North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Then we were able to disseminate this information with one selected local education agency in Buncombe County, North Carolina. So then the training was offered to these educators who were very carefully selected. There was a selection process for the LA being selected, and there was a selection process for the teachers. So then we were able to once again experience this same material from a different viewpoint. Without having that foundational knowledge, I don't think we would have been able to support those teachers and actually continue to learn through the process, because the second time through, it was really through a different lens. because teachers were presenting problems that they had and difficulties for students that they were working with. So it became very real in that situation through that approach. So I really like the way the resources are structured. The approach is structured with NCII because it does build sustainability. So that way we will step away from so much of dependence on NCII and their expertise. We will there over time become the experts, and we were able to, throughout the state of North Carolina, build capacity in all of the local education agencies who are interested in this approach and these resources. NCII has provided so many valuable resources for us that we've been able to embed that in many of our courses. A few examples would be our Foundations of Math course. It is a 5-day course for teachers and also administrators. And this fits very nicely around the components of number sense. We believe in building a conceptual understanding and certainly not teaching procedures, because I simply learned a lot of procedures. It was very abstract for me. So our focus around concrete, representational, and abstract fits very, very nicely with the NCII resources because they approach it in the same way. The resources we're able to embed within our courses, such as the specific learning disabilities in math, and with a focus on dyscalculia and other learning disabilities, as well as the Foundations of Math course that I referenced earlier. This not only complements our courses, but it also provides a supplement so that we can have booster sessions, follow-up sessions, or simply send this resource in the form of a video. Dr. Sarah Powell has created some phenomenal 3 to 5 minute videos. As you're listening to me today, I hope that my passion for this is coming through, that I sincerely believe in the NCII approach, the interventions and the resources that are provided. And I guess the bottom line is I do feel that it gives hope to teachers to be able to reach students with the most significant needs, and in turn it gives hope to these students who have struggled for so long that they also can learn. They become believers in themselves.
North Carolina NCII team extends to their district-level instructional coaches and school-level teachers. Listen to Elsa Iglesias, instructional coach for Buncombe County Schools, North Carolina.
Currently, I am the instructional coach for exceptional children in Buncombe County Schools in Asheville, North Carolina. And I am also the Western Region coach for mathematics for the Department of Public Instruction for North Carolina. So I help teachers out in the Western region, the mountains out here in the western part of North Carolina. I help teachers instruct students, and so that's one of the things I do. With our work with NCII, what I did was I'm part of a leadership team. Department of Public Instruction asked us to ask Buncombe County Schools to be involved in a project with them with NCII. So I went onto the website and I got really excited after I went to a couple of the meetings and saw some of the work that we were going to be doing. I went onto the website and I took one of the courses for intensive intervention mathematics. It was really very well done. I loved it. I learned a lot, and I started passing that back out to my teachers and to my colleagues, to other instructional coaches. So then COVID happened. And we were, our instructional coaches in our county were asked to come up with some professional development for our teachers because of COVID. A lot of our teachers were at home and needed some extra training, especially now with remote. So what I did was I took that course that NCII has and I developed a Google Classroom. And instead of just giving it to my Buncombe County teachers, I made it available to the Western Region. Because I'm the Western Region instructional coach for Department of Public Instruction, I passed it out to all the other counties as well. So I invited all the other counties to participate, and we got overloaded. I had about 70 to 75 teachers log on to the course and actually start completing the course. And so I didn't realize there was going to be that many who got involved, because I had promised them certificates and CEUs. So I started grading their all of the materials they did. We got lots of great discussion, lots of great questions. I got a lot of great feedback from teachers outside of my region that were telling me, Elsa, this is so good. I'm so excited. So what I did was I went back, and I am also an instructional coach. I also teach reading. So I went ahead and did the foundations, the course for NCII for reading as well. So I did that, and I developed that into a Google course as well. So those are the two things that I've done. Also, I went on to NCII, and they have a lot of resources. And so one of the resources was on progress monitoring, which is one of our biggest projects for our school system, but for EC teachers in general, a lot of progress monitoring. And so I took their progress monitoring Excel sheet that they had on their website, and I showed it to my teachers, and they're using it. So it's on my Google site. I have a instructional coach Google site. So NCII pictures very much on my Google site. I use the Google site. I show them where part of my Google site shows the NCII website. Then it also tells them about the intensive interventions courses, and then it has a link to my Google Classroom. I put on there the Excel, all sorts of resources, and our teachers are really loving it. The minute someone asks me about something, I tell them, well, have you visited NCII's website? Because that website is chock full of good, great stuff.
North Carolina NCII team has extended to the state's university teacher preparation programs. Listen to Samantha Gessel, assistant professor at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, describe her inclusion of NCII resources and DBI in her work.
All of my students have high priorities of either currently teaching or teaching in their future within North Carolina schools. And so they're highly motivated to stay within the state. And I therefore feel this immense need to make sure I'm adequately preparing them to be able to enter into that classroom ready to hit the ground running with the things that we know schools need. So for example, in conversations with local principals, one principal noted a real desire to make sure that they're hiring teachers who have keen abilities, especially at the elementary level, to be able to teach literacy deeply with students, but more importantly, to be able to apply data literacy and assessment literacy within what they're doing, to be able to dive into reading data and be able to make decisions about students and targeting your instruction, whether it's targeting small group instruction within a general ed classroom, or if it is individualizing and tailoring intervention work for students who need that additional supplemental tiered intervention work with their intervention teachers or their special educators, whatever it might be. So thinking about those conversations with local principals, when designing the assessment course and the advanced literacy course, I wanted to make sure that I was adequately preparing these future teachers and current teachers to be able to engage in that work meaningfully. What that meant was diving deeply into the NCII resources, giving those undergraduates and grad certs the opportunity to know that these resources exist. So at the level of knowing that there are tools charts that help us identify the evidence base across different versions of universal screening tools and progress monitoring tools for academics and behavior. And to be able to know where they can go to find that information to help make decisions about the assessments they might use, or to help evaluate the extent to which their current assessment systems might need to be supplemented with additional sources. In addition to that, we dive deeply into the process of database individualization, or DBI. And so I end my assessment course with sort of a module on DBI and what that means to be creating systems of database decision-making that you as a teacher could do within your own classroom, or even more powerfully through the lens of data teams and the broader school system that can exist. When we are able to create intervention plans for our students, use data meaningfully to monitor progress across time, and intentionally and systematically make adaptations to instruction based on student response. So in order to help my students, particularly my pre-service students, be able to engage in those activities, we dive into the resources related to DBI, related to the taxonomy of intensification, intervention intensity, and also to be able to dive into some of those webinars that exist that kind of give an applied context to understand how this could look in a real life context. In those sessions, I also give plenty of time for things like just discussion-based learning, where we can kind of dive into those more deeply and talk about our clicks and clunks, clicks being things that the undergrads or grad certs are feeling, yes, this makes sense, I see the way this could be enacted. Clunks being things that are sort of like a traffic jam, where they're kind of having a moment of like, ooh, I'm not sure if I can see how this works. And sometimes that sort of more discussion-based opportunity allows them to grapple with the material even more deeply, using NCII resources as a starting point for that. The flip side of that being the master's course in advanced literacy, where in that course, we're our own data teams. And these teachers are getting the applied time to be able to choose a target student who is in their classroom, to be able to bring them to a referral meeting using NCII forms for referral meetings, or pre-referral, to be able to talk about that student, to have hypothesis-driven discussions around that student, to inform planning and intervention and an assessment plan, to then be able to enact that assessment plan, tracking their own adherence to that plan across time, and to come back to the data meeting every 4 to 6 weeks and be able to revisit the student data and talk about what that kid's doing and whether there is adequate response or not. And if not, what that might mean for potential adaptations to instruction, where all of the other students get to serve as collaborative team members to be able to ask questions that are kind of pushing the point of really trying to understand that student more, to be able to make suggestions for the intensification strategy checklist and design adaptation plans along the dimensions of intervention intensity in a way that truly is making progress for those target students, for the current teachers. And across all of these classes, again, it's through this amazing lens of serving North Carolina students and serving either current schools that those teachers are working in or future schools that those teachers are going to be working in, so that we can all create a heightened level of expertise in being able to engage in this work for the students who have those most persistent and intensive needs.
We're framing kind of everything we do around that taxonomy of intensification, this is an example of how did the DBI work? How is it kind of finding its way into the way we think about everything, right? And so that taxonomy has been like I said, it is the framework with which we're approaching this particular professional learning project. Is this it's combined with our growing understanding about locating a student on a learning progression and comparing their place to the grade level expectation, and kind of calculating what is gap closing growth, what is achievable this year in this IEP, like that the science of that is, I don't think we can talk about learning progressions without also having kind of in our bag the practices around DBI. I'm coming at it now mostly from our state systemic improvement plan, and whatever we choose as our focus for improvement for students with disabilities, we're gonna have to think about data-based individualization for individual student progress and for our progress as a state, both.